Thank you. Namaste, Vanakkam. I'm very happy to be here in Dubai and very honored to be invited on a Valentine's Day, that too. I hope I can live up to the billing here. Otherwise, there will be a lot of upset people here. Thank you.
Sir, my first question, how did you come up with this idea of Zoho?
So I was a student in IIT Madras, graduated in '89, and I didn't have any idea that I would become a businessman. I actually wanted to become a professor. My own interest was highly mathematical. Even though I was an engineering student, my interest was mostly gearing towards mathematical work, and my PhD in Princeton was highly mathematical. So when I graduated, I actually thought at that time I would become a professor. That was my goal. But sometime during the last year of PhD, changed for me. I realized that I'm not being very useful. This work is not going to make a difference to the world. So then I decided to go to the private sector. I said I will not continue in this line. So I went to Qualcomm in San Diego. That's what changed the course. And there I noticed that, of course, in Qualcomm, even then, I'm talking about 1994, 95, so much of the talent was Indian. This is a relatively small company then, about 1,500, 1,700 employees. And yet so much of the talent engineers were Indian. So much of the high value R&D work was done by Indians. And then I realized, so we are doing all this work here, but we are not, there's no tech company out of India. My brother, who was to be with me, he was a software engineer, I was a wireless engineer. We would have lunch together, dinner together at home, all that. And then we talking about this. Why is there a really large tech company out of India, particularly doing all these products, high-tech products, filing patents, all of that. That what we are doing here in San Diego. Is there something in the water that we come to the US and we do all this and we can't do it in Chennai or wherever? Then actually in '95 November, he suddenly decided I'll go back to India and get started. Actually, he was the one, Kumar was the one who returned to India in '95, and this was the mission. And he took 2 computers with him, and he showed up at home. And he said, we are starting a company. My parents were scared. What? Suddenly he just showed up. But that's how it started. Really. And I left my job in '96 April. He started in November '95. And since then it's been a constant.
So sir, you started with the humble beginning, and now your company and your product CRM suite is directly competing with the likes of Microsoft, Oracle, Salesforce. So what was your mission when you created this company?
Yeah, so
and your vision.
Yeah,
both.
I had once I decided that I'd be in business like this. I studied Japan.
Okay.
And the reason I studied Japan is I wanted to find an Asian country with similar culture to us that built world-class products. Which of course you cannot miss a Japanese brand. I mean, then it was even more dominant then than now, but even now you cannot fail to see a Japanese brand. So I studied probably I bought 5 or 10 books about Japanese industry. I studied them very closely. And I said, we have to build that kind of company. And I knew then that would be a long haul. We cannot do it in 5 years. So myself and my brother and Tony Thomas, our co-founder who is from Kerala, we all resolved to do this. And so that's why 26 years later we're still going strong. But even then in 96, 97, we knew that it would be in this for the rest of our lives, essentially. And the inspiration came from Japan. And the kind of companies Japan built, whether it's Sony, whether it's Honda, whether it's Toyota, whether it's Canon, all these are world-beating companies. Can we build such companies in India? So that was the kind of the intellectual puzzle for me, and that's what we've been answering since then.
Okay, the top tier quality management companies.
Yes. And really solid technology, durable products, global brands, well respected, all of it.
Okay, I have heard that you mentioned numerous times about the durability and reliability of the software. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But as a gathering here, we would like to know your concept of bootstrapping. Unlike most of the companies that is out there in the fore, your company has not raised any capitals, and we see recent times a lot of bubbles being burst in the startup sector. So what's so peculiar about Zoho? Why did you choose this path?
So this goes back in the beginning, 96, 97. It's not like you go in and venture capitalists fund you. Even in Silicon Valley, I actually moved to San Jose in 96. Even there it wasn't easy. It was 96. So we had to bootstrap at that time because of venture capital isn't going to be readily available. But once we became profitable, in the year 2000 actually we had achieved about 10 million in revenue and we were growing very fast. And a venture capitalist approached us. And I talked to him and we actually met in US, we met in Chennai, all of it. Then he gave us a term sheet. Fortunately for me, I looked over what's there. Normally people don't look at it. He gave a damn good valuation. Actually, he valued the company at $200 million for a $10 million revenue company, which is a hyper valuation. Then there was a bubble then, right? I looked over the term sheet and it said, we have to guarantee an exit or liquidity in 7 years. And I said, no, I don't agree to this. He said, that's a very standard terms. I mean, everybody has this. How will we get paid? No, I'm going to be in this forever. So if you are not interested in this, being in this forever, I don't want you to be my investor. He said, you are contesting terms that are nobody contests. Then I won't take anybody's money.
Oh.
So that's it. Afterwards, we decided not to take money. That's the last time I ever talked to a VC.
So many of you might not know where he bases his operations from. We know that most of the tech companies are based in Silicon Valley. Many are based in Bangalore, in India, in Mumbai, in UAE. But he operates from a small village in the district of Tenkasi. His office is in a village called Matalampare. Matalampare. And he lives in a place where, in a village, only his neighbors are only 1,500 people. So tell me about that story.
So this was about actually the Tenkasi, Dakshin Kashi, for those of you, Ten Tamil is south. So it's literally southern Kashi, and that's the district. And we had bought this land about 12 years ago. And we put a small operation there. Actually, 5-6 of our employees from Chennai moved there. And this is a long-standing dream of mine that I had again studied companies. You look at, for example, the world's leading robotics company, industrial robots, Fano, that's based in rural Japan. Honda's own origin is in rural Japan. And in the US, you will see GE Research in upstate New York, which is pretty rural. IBM has had rural centers in the US. Bell Labs was in rural New Jersey. Afterwards, New Jersey urbanized, but when Bell Labs was originally founded in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, the heyday of Bell Labs was in rural New Jersey. So I knew that you could do quality work from a rural location. In fact, for the kind of R&D we do, it's even better because we need peace and quiet, and you have to concentrate on long period. I mentioned solitude. You need solitude to do good R&D work, to file patents, to invent technology. It's different, very different from marketing, all of that, right? You need a very quiet environment. So I knew that. So I thought, why can't we do it in rural India? Do it in rural Japan, rural US, why not in rural India? So I convinced some of our engineers who were interested in moving there, and 6 of them started in 2011 in Tenkasi. And then that operation grew and grew and grew. And about 4 or 5 years later, we moved to this bigger office in Matalampare, where we bought literally an abandoned fruit pulp factory. So this is 15 acres and a fruit pulp factory that has been abandoned. That became our software center there, product development center. And the product that came out, Zoho Desk, then is sold worldwide. I mean, from, for example, from Germany to Dubai to US, everywhere we have a huge number of customers now. Over 100,000 customers on it now. But this is made in Tenkasi, this product. So that success convinced me that we can do a lot more. In fact, I decided to move myself in 2019 to Tenkasi, because that's where I was going to go. When I always wanted to return to India, and I also knew that when I return, I'll go to India. Again, for the same reason, because I personally work in R&D, I like that peace and quiet. So I moved myself to Tenkasi to this farm, and our traffic jam is buffaloes. In other words, I go around, if there's a traffic jam, that's because there's a huge number of buffaloes, and they are very stubborn, very slow. So they can take 5 minutes to clear out. But you tend to enjoy the traffic jam. You don't actually get frustrated. So that's the kind of atmosphere I'm in, and I love it. So 3.5 years now I've stayed there. I don't think I'll go anywhere else.
Before going to the next question, so can you just, for the uninitiated, can you just give a brief description about the products and the software that you are providing?
Yeah, if you go to Zoho.com, you'll see the full portfolio of our products. That's actually only part of it. There is a sister division called Manage Engine. You'll see another huge. This whole umbrella is called Zoho Call. We are now over $1 billion, about 13,000 employees. We are the largest software product company. If you look at the India's software landscape, almost most of the companies were doing IT services, providing services. That could be TCS, Infosys, Wipro, all of them. We are the largest product company. After us, now many companies have emerged. We are still the largest now, and we're growing fast now. And global operations now, about 13,000. In Dubai itself, we have about 50 people now. We're going to double their income. That's part of the reason why I'm here, because this market is growing so fast. I have to be here to the next stage.
So your core product is software.
So and we compete with everyone from Microsoft to Salesforce, all of it. For example, one of our fast-moving products here is Zoho Workplace, which competes directly with Exchange, and it competes with Microsoft Teams, all of them. That's a very fast-growing product in the UAE market.
So the next question is in a continuum with this particular question. So your core product is software and high-end software. So how do you source your human capital from the rural Indias where our education system is just growing, taking shape there? And what are the challenges that you faced? And we've been learning throughout the last couple of years that the social engineering, that's the change of the social fabric that Zoho Corporation have initiated. So can you give us in detail about your experience overall?
I'll step back a little bit. I went to IIT Madras. I went to Princeton. That experience convinced me that degrees are worthless. Both, actually, honestly. In fact, even in IIT, I had my doubts. Whether is this degree really doing anything to me? I mean, am I learning something productive, hands-on? After Princeton, I was completely cued up that notion. And then in our industry, the biggest billionaires are all college dropouts. You know, from Bill Gates to Steve Jobs to Michael Dell to Mark Zuckerberg. Nobody finished college. It's not an accident. You know. In fact, we would have been a bigger company if I had dropped out from IIT earlier. Seriously. So I probably left $5-10 billion on the table by finishing college and finishing PhD. Seriously. If somebody is a very smart kid, I would say don't go to college. That's the repeat the template in this business. From Bill Gates all the way to Zuckerberg, everybody has followed the same blueprint. They can't all be wrong, So, but I'll tell you why that is so. Particularly in our business, but in most businesses, you only learn by doing. You really don't learn by writing exams and writing endless exams, all of it, or grades, all of it. That's absolutely true. And we knew this even back in 96, 97. And other thing, you talk about the India's education system. Japan's education system was always known to be rote learning. The Japanese never thought of their education system as very superior. They got the basics right, schooling, but their colleges, they didn't consider themselves very good. In Japan, this was true because I studied Japan very closely. So then how do they make all the talent? In their companies, not in their colleges, in their companies. So this I knew back even in 96, 97. And then our experiments in India, my brother, when he moved back, he conducted some experiments. He hired some people with no background and taught them C programming, all of that. And they started performing exceptionally well. So we knew these experimental results also. In fact, many times we noticed that the college grades and the work performance had no correlation at all. And since then, those results, Google published a paper on this. Google's HR published a paper that how somebody performs in college, how they do in software, don't have any correlation. So we knew all this, but then why do we worship the degree as if it's gospel? So we decided in 2004 to start our own Zoho Schools of Learning, what it's called. It used to be called Zoho University. We dropped the name because in India, calling it a university could get us in regulatory trouble, so we call it Zoho Schools of Learning now. So we take high school students, finished after +2. We don't even require them. I mean, somebody could drop out of school and join us, but at least for the sake of their parents, we insist that they finish the school. And then we take these kids and we put them through our own very rigorous hands-on program. It's about a year and a half. In fact, one of my colleagues, Akshaya, is here. She actually was a faculty there. And she now runs our school, preschool of that. And so that program yielded very huge dividends for us. About 15% of our talent in Zoho has no degrees at all. In the next 10 years, that will become 50%. Because we are expanding our Zoho schools massively so that we can get 50% of our talent from this program. And the quality, I mean, I can tell you, these kids are filing patents. There's actually one who spoke at our event yesterday, who's 20-year-old. 20, only 20. And he studied in our Zoho School of Business, and he made presentation to important partners yesterday. So he's here actually in Dubai, visiting from Chennai. There's numerous such examples. We have actually 20-year-olds who visited Japan. Our Japanese customers couldn't believe this kid is only 20 and he's doing this important work. I have engineers working with me personally on some R&D projects who are 19, 20, inventing brilliant technology. So you can do this actually, you can do this. There's, we don't need college degrees and you can work on cutting edge technology, but you have to provide the right environment. This is again a lesson from Japan. And all of these countries, the critical thing is not that their education system got better. They got better after they industrialized. That's important sequencing to remember. They first set up industry, then their education got better. The reverse doesn't work. I'll give you an example. In rural Tamil Nadu, you have numerous universities and colleges, engineering colleges. But all they have become is efficient vacuum cleaners of talent. They render it somewhere else. Those regions stay rural and poor. They don't actually ever advance. In fact, I have said this in many of these rural universities where they invite me. I say, how many of the students are going to stay here in this region after finishing? Almost nobody will raise their hands. So setting up a college in a rural area is not going to advance the place. Setting up industry there will advance the place. That's my experience. That's what I'm doing right.
So your model is to bring back the self-sustained village economy back.
Yes. And this again, this is actually last 3 years of what I learned. If you look at rural India today, it's not what we may have in our image. It's actually a vastly different landscape in the last 40, 50 years. First of all, rural economy was not primarily only agriculture based. It's a mix of all the professions were there. You had carpenters, you had ironsmiths, you had blacksmiths, you had goldsmiths, you had all of this, vaidyas and priests, all of it. It's a very, and weavers, potters, you name it, all the professions are represented in a cluster of about 10, 15 kilometer radius. Within that, you had a very diversified regional economy. This was true even up till about 50 years ago. Today, all of those professions have vanished. So you are grandchildren of weavers or potters or ironsmiths. They are all landless labor, or they are migrant workers in Bangalore or in Dubai or elsewhere. Where do the migrants come from? If you go look it up, they are typically their father, their grandfather would have been an artisan, a craftsman. They lost their livelihood. They don't own land. Typically, those people, those carpenters would not be landowning people, so they don't even have land. So they become landless labor, and then they migrate. And this is the local economy now. The second thing that has happened is we have created consumption. If you go to rural village now, you'll see motorcycles, you'll see smartphones, you will see gas stoves, you'll see fridges, all of it. Except that we don't produce any of it anywhere nearby. The entire district, there's not a factory. But how do we afford the cell phones? How do we afford the fridges? Well, you are selling the land, you are going into debt, migrant labor remittance, or government, the Manrega type of transfer programs. So these are the only ways. Or loan sharking, often loan sharking. I mean, I know in our village, for example, at least 40-50% of the people will have more than 5 payments, monthly payments. Everything is borrowed, bought and installment. And you will see the nearby towns, all the stores will advertise you can buy it with zero money down. This is true in rural India. This structure is not sustainable. We have to create production-based jobs, productive jobs, to balance the local economy. We are consuming without producing locally. So I have decided that that's part of my next effort. We set up a school precisely to train the kids in this holistic education, not only the reading, writing, arithmetic, basics. We also have workshops. We have computer labs, all that now we are setting up, so that these kids, school kids, this is before Zoho schools of learning, our rural kids can learn the skills so that they are employable when they come out. Some of them may choose to go to college. Most of the rural kids don't have an option to go to college. They're too poor. So at least they're employable by someone. I also want to set up factories now. In most rural districts, there are hardly any other jobs. You have to migrate. If you're ambitious, you have to migrate.
So you need factories which caters to the secondary sector like manufacturing?
Manufacturing. So I have a manufacturing R&D initiative now. What goods? It's the very same household goods we are already consuming. Okay. I mean, in Twitter, I often talk about the nail clipper as an example. You go to rural Tirkasi, you go to a store, you buy a nail clipper for whatever, 60, 70, 80 rupees. You'll find made in China or made in South Korea. Nobody can argue that South Korea is a low-wage economy that's able to export this very basic product to us.
Economies of scale.
So it is, then why is South Korea exporting to us? Why aren't we able to make it? And therein lies the tale. I actually studied this problem. Scissors in the, what the barbers use, those are important. Why? Turns out that level of steel is not made in India. We make a lot of steel, but not this type of steel. And because then I spoke to the R&D heads of steel industry. I asked them, why don't we make the steel? Oh, these are low volume. We focus on high volume steel. But these are high volume. A kilogram of steel will go for 90, 100 rupees in the low grade. But here a nail clipper is going for 60 rupees. That's not a kilogram, that's maybe 50 grams, right? So it's high value steel. That's what is needed for the cutting edge. We don't make them. So we end up importing the finished products from abroad, South Korea or China. Even there is quality difference. The South Korean product is often better than the Chinese product. You can see it. So this means that we have to invest in R&D, in metallurgy, in the steel making, even nail clipper making machines, all of that. So these are some of the things I've set up an R&D team now to figure out.
Let's take a small deviation from this hard talk of business to philosophy. Sridhar Vembu is a vocal of prosperity rooted on contentment. So what's this philosophy of prosperity rooted on contentment, and how do you marry this idea with profit-based business?
Well, these are not my ideas, these are ancient Indian ideas. Our saint of Kanchi said the roots of Indian philosophy ultimately contentment and humility. Those are the two words that ultimately matter. If you understand Indian spirituality, it is contentment and humility. So I sincerely believe in this from experience. It's not just theory, it's not just preaching, from experience. Humility, because we can often be wrong. Any decision we make in business, in personal life can be wrong. If we are humble about it, we can reverse course. If we are arrogant about it, we don't even see our own mistakes. So that's one. Contentment is important because, well, it's ultimately now we are recognizing slowly the limits to growth everywhere. Global warming is one challenge. Depletion of fish in the ocean, to depletion of topsoil, to all of these issues are coming to the fore now. Fossil fuel issues, all of it. So what is prosperity then? And if you look at prosperity, there is a curve that I saw. Essentially, prosperity, GDP, correlates heavily with energy consumption. Can all of India, 1.4 billion people, consume the same level of energy per capita as the average American? Is that possible? What happens to our atmosphere? What happens to our emissions? All of these are valid questions. Can we afford that standard of energy consumption in India? And I then go back and look at my village grandmother, my father's mother, and I look at her lifetime energy consumption and mine. And I take planes and I drive a car, all of this. I calculated it's about 1,000 times her energy consumption over a lifetime. 1,000 times. That means 1.4 million Indians like me would consume 1.4 billion Indians worth of our energy. Serious 3 orders of magnitude here. So these are not sustainable. In other words, it's not about population. It's how much energy each of us consume, right? So these questions have been swirling in my head for a long time. And then after moving back to the village, I decided, well, I enjoy this life. I don't need to consume a lot of energy. So I just adopted a lifestyle that suits me.
So do you have any solution for the national problems that we are facing? Like India is uplifting millions of people from poverty by decade after. But that correlates with higher energy consumption.
Yes.
But we have limits to growth. So what is the middle point?
This is an extremely important question, not just for India, but the entire world. Because it's not true that even the US can afford the current energy consumption per capita. It's not clear. You can talk about alternative energy, renewable energy, all of it, but sometimes the physics, if you go deep into the physics, the rare earth materials involved in making batteries, all of this,
Lithium.
they don't all add up. They don't add up probably even for the US. They don't add up if everybody in China and everybody in India, everybody in Africa, everybody in Latin America, everybody consumes the present level of American standard of consumption. I don't think all these numbers add up. Nobody has figured out a way. The same thing with, for example, this is a number somebody recently quoted. If everyone adopted the Indian standard of food, we can maybe support twice the global population today. If everybody adopted the American standard of food, We cannot support the present population of the earth today with the availability of land and water and all the resources. So these are absolute limits. We are reaching absolute limits. So we have to rethink, what does prosperity mean in this context? I have very happy news for you, because I live in a place where our consumption is very low. It's like my grandmother level of consumption. We are much more contented. With limited consumption, I actually am much happier in my village than I ever was in the US. I'm much healthier too, honestly. So I walk a lot. I walk 10, 15 kilometers a day, and I drive my electric auto now.
Let me ask one question. So let me take another deviation. So some just food is waiting for us.
Yes, right.
But Mr. Sridhar Vembu is having his own very special diet. Or we all speak about microbiota and how our bacteria lives in our body, how it stimulates us. His special diet has changed his health over past decades. So can you explain to our audience?
It's not my special diet. I actually
It's an ancient diet. It's an ancient diet.
So
but
our
still.
ancient diet, my childhood, I was exposed to it. We actually have the rice fermented in the night. We just put it in a mud pot usually, pour some water on it. Next morning, it will fermented. Mix it with the buttermilk and have it with maybe some onions or pickles or whatever. Right? That's the diet we had in the morning in the villages. Then it disappeared due to prosperity, because once people get richer, they think it's all backward, and who would have this, right? But now it's coming back.
Yes.
And I adopted it for a very good reason, because I had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. So people think I'm thin by choice. No, it's not because of that. For a lot of my life, I refused to eat at all, because eating is torture. You cannot travel, and I will not. There was not a single exam in life I ever ate and went. I would just do water and go to the exam, because I don't want the torture of the stomach. The stomach becomes torture. So I learned to cope with it. And then I studied about the whole probiotics and all of this. Then I made the connection that our whole food was actually very probiotic. So I started adopting it. In the village, it's common. And every day, that's what I have. Even in the 5-star hotel where I'm staying, I requested rice. And then I have it soaked and water.
Even that has a Japanese connection.
Yes.
Traditional Japanese food like natto, kimchi. Everything is probiotic.
Exactly.
Like these stimulates your intestinal microbiota, and intestinal microbiota is called your second brain.
Yes.
So everything is interconnected. Basically, you are not your cells. You are bacteria.
All manner of autoimmune disorders, mental illnesses actually are subject to this whole probiotic, the gut bacteria.
We have so much of arrogance that this is us, but even the powerhouse of our cell,
This diet doesn't cost
anything.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Doesn't cost anything. That's the weird part.
So let's come back to serious business. So how do you see startups with relation to India UAE relations?
So we are, of course, seeing a major tech boom in India. This is very predictable, because so much talent is coming out from our schools, from colleges, from cities, all of it. So much ambitious talent. All of it is globally exposed. Even in villages now, ambitious kids are actually going to the internet, finding out all this. This is true everywhere now. So this is the stage of that takeoff. And our rural infrastructure has gotten really much better now, thanks to the Prime Minister's road scheme and the whole fiber optics everywhere. I live in a very remote village. I have 300 megabit per second connection at home. It only cost me 1,200 rupees a month. So they're cheap. And so that's my connectivity to the world, and I have 2 connections like that. So all this infrastructure is going to fuel now a massive wave of startups. Of course, with all these bubbles come and bubble money poured in, but I think the long-term diagnosis is very good. And same way, India now has the demographic dividend to power the world with our brains. And that is UAE, that is, of course, we know about the US, Europe, and Japan, Korea. Last few months, I've heard a lot of people moving to Korea, Indians in Korea now. Because those tech companies, Samsung and all that, need our talent. So it is going to power this, and UAE, I think, is of course welcoming, very easy to come here. I believe this is going to be a big business destination for Indians. I see the correct, and there is money here, investors, all of that. I met a few investors here too.
Government of India's flagship schemes like Startup India and Digital India has been conducive in creating a lot of startups back in India. So as a pioneer who adopted these schemes of Government of India, what are your experience to share among this global audience?
India's there's night and day difference between 30 years ago and now. Things move fast, and I tell you, 15 years ago, our CFO would go to Delhi every hour, so often for this approval or that approval. Nowadays, he never goes to Delhi because all of it is automatic. It's huge improvement, huge. It just cannot, there was one I remember about 10, 12 years ago, he had to go 18 times for one specific approval. But now he doesn't go at all. He hardly ever goes to Delhi or CFO. So that's the nature of the changes that have happened. And everything, from railways, I take the trains, I take our buses, all of it, the roads are better. I travel in rural India often. So it is much better now. I would say for the global diaspora of Indians, I would say, no, go adopt a district in India. You will be surprised how things have changed. In fact, my next investment is going to be in UP, rural UP, Eastern UP, not Western UP, the Delhi region. Eastern UP, I actually traveled in Sonbhadra district about 2-3 months ago. I'm also going to Purvanchal region, particularly in Devariya. We are actually funding an effort there. So I am learning Hindi because I want to be in UP next.
So this is your concept of transnational localism.
Yes, yeah.
So is this easily emulatable for other startups, or do you face constant challenges on this path?
It is possible. See, if you have a long-term orientation, whatever we are doing is easily replicable. The key is the long-term orientation. You cannot expect magic in 2 years, but you can actually do something very meaningful in 10 years. So that's the kind of timeline we get. If you go to UP, it's not like I expect immediately in 2 years will be huge. But in 10 years, I'm very confident we'll have a very sizable operation.
Okay. So to sum up with my last question, so India recently acquired this presidency of G20, and we have been showcasing our good soft power across the world. What are your views on it?
Yes, for a variety of reasons. Not just technology, not just software, not just the brain power, but also India has a lot to offer the world in terms of finding some new solutions for these global problems. This is the soft power. So this prosperity with contentment is very important. That is, how do we reconcile all this? Does development mean burning up more of the fossil fuels, more of the, destroying more of our soil, more of our water resources, all of it? These questions have to be answered, and these are not merely, just some environmentalist worry. This is actually everyone's concern now. So it is, and in a different way, the US society where I lived 30 years, and you see a lot of the social inequality exploding. You saw all the, the riots and all of this. And it was predictable. It was predictable because when inequality goes that high, society tends to fall apart. And the guns that are pervasive now, more guns than people in the US. And so if we get to that level of inequality anywhere, those things will happen. That's what the US has found out now. How do we address those problems? And the solutions have to integrate not just economics, sociology, our spirituality, our notion of what is fair, what is just. And it has to do it not just by some heavy government solutions, but also the private sector, the voluntary sector, all of these have to work together. And these solutions, I believe, will come from India. That is why I believe the virtual group.
Okay. Last question. What's your message to Indian startups? Very briefly.
Focus on the long haul, be persistent, invest in R&D, because we have to apply our brain power to solve these problems.